Welcome to the Herd Mentality Podcast, an eclectic weekly mix of atheistic and humanistic conversations with complete strangers. I've never met them and they've never met me, but we're throwing caution to the wind, taking a risk with a dodgy internet connection, and God willing, get an interesting conversation for you to listen to. I'm your host, Adam Reeks, and it's time to meet our guests. Thank you very much for coming to the Herd Mentality Podcast. Today on the show we've got Gamma Atheist, who is desperate for some more attention. So not only did he get episode 3, he's also taking up 1/3 of episode 4, and we welcome him and we thank him for it. We've also got at Skeptical Park and at Dan RL. So welcome everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
So today we're going to have probably a bit of a yak, get to know each other, shake hands, kiss babies, and then talk about this secular parenting thing that I know very little about. So you're going to have to enlighten me. So let's just find out a little bit about you guys. Dan, whereabouts are you based?
I'm in San Diego, California, in the U.S.
It sounds so cool. It sounds very exotic.
It's very warm all the time.
And I'm looking at your picture on Skype here. It seems to be that you're about 4 years old. Is that really you?
2 years old, actually.
2 years old.
2.5.
This is how little I know about children. I'd suggest that's perhaps a photo of your child.
It is.
Okay, there's no priests on this call? No, I'm just, okay, good. We're good to go. And Skeptical Park, tell us a little bit about you. Where are you based?
I'm in the Chicagoland area. I know that's an odd thing, but yeah, they call truly here in Chicago area, we call it Chicagoland, which I'm not originally from here, but that is indeed the term used to describe the greater Chicago area. Chicago, Illinois in the U.S.
It certainly does what it says on the tin, Chicagoland. I mean, presumably you occupy some land.
Yes.
And Gamma Atheist, we've had you on already, but enlighten our guests, our listeners.
Yeah, I'm in northern Florida, Jacksonville area. I mean, that's what I'm about. But
cool. All right, so today's topic is we're going to focus something specific here. So we're talking about secular parenting. So I've got you guys on because you have manufactured children yourselves. Now, I don't understand how the process works. Can you just talk me through, please, how you came about having children?
Well, it starts with God. Right. And a lot of prayer.
So when Mummy and Daddy love each other in a very special way. How many kids do you have, Dan?
I have one.
Okay. Are you collecting the set?
We're into having another, but we'll see what happens.
All right. Well, God willing.
it's in God's name.
Skeptical Park, tell us.
I have 3. I have a 9-year-old and I have 6-year-old twins. So sleep deprivation in our house a few years ago was pretty serious.
God hates you.
He does. He has it in for me. He's given me more than I can handle, which is the lie that's been told to me over the years, that he only gives you as much as you can handle, right?
Are they,
I've got more than my
so
fair
you
share.
say they're twins. There's different types of twins.
Yeah.
Specify.
They are fraternal, and I have one of each gender. I have a boy twin and a girl twin.
Okay. I went to school with a boy twin and a girl twin, and they are completely different. In fact, as they've grown up, one's, I think, now married and the other one is in a gay relationship. And there's, there's a boy and a girl there as well. So, yeah, and Gamma Atheists.
I have 2 girls. One is 5 years old and the other one is 6 months old.
Oh.
It's like a bought one.
Yeah, the stork was just recently here.
Okay, that stork must be exhausted. So between you all, you've got that's 6 children.
Mm-hmm.
Rightio.
We're like Mormons.
Yeah.
We're Mormons.
So, vaccination was on the topic last episode. Please tell me your children are vaccinated.
Absolutely.
Yeah, up to date.
Cool. And are you finding, what's the local vibe in your areas? We'll kick off with you, Dan. Is there a bit of a backlash where you are against vaccination?
A little bit. I think overall vaccinations are pretty common here, but in California especially, we're going through a really big whooping cough epidemic. And so, the word is out to vaccinate, but I do know a handful of people that just refuse to do it and still hold on to, disproven ideas and, Jenny McCarthyism that are still touting, autism and, countless things that we've completely proven to be false are still being held on to as belief. And it's scary. You have to watch who your kids hang out with because of it.
Look, let me just clarify something from the previous episode. We had Secular Bloke on and he did a great deal of research into, I think because he's curious about the topic of anti-vax, stated that the initial trial for the MMR autism link contained 600 people. Now, Dr. Dave Hawkes, who goes by the Twitter handle @Mr. Hawkes, Hawkes, he's coming on the Herd Mentality podcast next week. So we've got a science edition coming up and we're all very excited about that. But he posted a link to us that the three guests on the previous show shared, and we'd just like to clarify that initial study did not have 600 participants in it. What he said was a small study actually involved 12. So not 600, 12.
Right. The whole thing was fraudulent. It was really a disgrace. And how, I think Mel said this the last podcast, that it's just astounding that he was ever even published. I mean, really quite astounding that study ever, got legs.
Yeah, all right. Well, look, we've kind of covered off vaccination previously, so if anybody's curious, jump onto episode 3 through iTunes. Perhaps what we'll move on to now is, how do you go about raising your children in a secular way? What makes raising your children different to the way the people in your communities raise their children? Go on, Dan.
It really is similar in many forms. I don't think a lot of, at least theists don't see it that way, where, we're all, in the end, we're all trying to instill values in our kids, morals, and we get them, in reality, we get most of them from the same place. They think they're getting, theirs from God and the Bible, but really we're all getting them from the same place, but it's what we push, as those values, where I'm pushing with my kid already at 2.5 of, everyone's the same. Everyone's equal. Mm-hmm. He's in a daycare with, all these different kinds of people, and it's showing him that everyone in that room is the same as him, equal as him, and we're gonna have to eventually, when they start really talking, go over people having different religions and different beliefs, and how he's going to have to address, his, because that, for a long time, he's only going to know what we know.
Yeah.
And, so there is going to be a point where we're going to have to, a kid in the playground is going to say to him, you're going to go to hell if you don't believe in God. My dad said so.
Must be true. So what age would you consider is a fair age to begin discussing religion with a child?
For me personally, I kind of like the idea of 10. But I don't know if that's going to be too late, because they're going to pick it up at school at some point. But
yeah, I would almost say maybe like 8, or like in that range. I mean, that's just my opinion. I mean, that was kind of like I said in the last podcast. That was kind of like my age range where I really started to question everything that was going on, and I was also able to kind of understand what I was questioning, because like my daughter's 5. And she will question things. Like, I remember her making a comment of, I don't know why people pray. All they're doing is just talking to themselves. So
she sounds like I'd like to have her on the show, I think.
Wouldn't that be interesting?
The best part about that was none of us said anything like that in front of her. She came to that realization on her own. So it was like a secret win for me, but I didn't let her know how excited I was.
Gamma, how did she know about praying? How does she know that concept?
Well, her mother is a convenient Catholic, and and when she was 3, she had a personal little tragedy. So there was a death in the family. So she explained to her God and praying and all of that, and I never stopped it. I mean, I wasn't against it, because at 3 years old, how do you explain death? So I didn't deter it or anything. And there's everyone. I mean, it's been a while since she's brought it up, but like in that time frame, she would say, we'd be sitting down to eat dinner, and she'd be like, "Hey, let's pray," and I said, "Okay, go ahead." I'd close my eyes and do all that with her, and then there'd be a couple times where I'd be sending her to bed, and she'd be like, well, I need to pray. I said, okay, go ahead. And I would do the motions with her. I never made a stink about her or anything.
Skeptical Park, what seems to be, in your opinion, the ideal time to introduce the discussion, at least with the children?
I'm still trying to figure that out, honestly. I feel really fortunate that my husband and I are both atheists, and so we have not introduced religion at all. We're kind of waiting for them to ask us, and then we'll have the discussion. At this point, we're trying to indoctrinate them with science, and I think my biggest stumbling block is not putting too much a spin on the questions they ask, and trying to teach them how to think instead of what to think. That's my big struggle right now, is avoiding putting an atheistic spin on my answers. In fact, they recently, I think it's horrible, I can't remember who, but somebody said, what is a soul, Mommy? And of course I questioned back and said, well, what do you think a soul is? And where did you hear that? And kind of let them talk about it. And so we're letting that age come from them. When they start questioning certain things. I mean, they don't even have the vocabulary. Just a few months ago, a dear friend of mine just said in passing something to my daughter, who was then still 5. Oh, I think so-and-so is at church. And she cocked her head at my friend and said, what's church? What's church? She didn't even have the vocabulary for it. And they've never been in a church. And so they've never even heard things like that. So I don't know what the perfect age is. We're waiting to find out.
Withholding information there, isn't it? Because And again, I can't really relate to this because I don't have children of my own. But when people ask me what church is, I point them to the name of a bar in England, in London. So you'd go out and have a big night out, boozing, and then come 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning when every other pub is shut, you'd go to church. There'd be an inch of sawdust on the floor to mop up after everybody's had a big night.
Oh.
And it was pretty atrocious.
Nasty.
So, well, that's my experience with church, and I've got to say it's probably certainly a lot more entertaining than what you've perhaps experienced. I've been having a bit of a chat about when a good time to introduce a child to religion might be. This is something I'm contemplating as well, because at some point in the future I'm going to discover where children come from. And it's going to be a curly one, because, I mean, my cat's now 5 years old and she still doesn't know what Catholicism is. So does this make me a bad person? I don't know. I wouldn't like for my children to be living in the dark. I don't think that's fair, but nor do I want to lie to them. So as we say, there's the fine line in giving them as much information as you possibly can and getting them to come to an informed decision about it. What sort of books do you read to your children? What do you recommend?
Right now I just read him pretty plain kid books, Cat in the Hat, Sesame Street, things that, just he likes. I mean, he's 2.5, like I said, so he's not really picking up the big stories. But, I did buy The Magic of Reality for him already, Richard Dawkins' book. And that I'll be reading to him as soon as I think he can understand any of it. I'll just start reading it to him next week. Yeah, why not? But I was going to say, I went to the American Humanist Conference about 2.5 weeks ago here in San Diego, and they actually did a whole panel about humanist parenting, secular parenting, and they gave an idea of when you're ready to talk to your kids. A lot of them bake cookies and do it in the shape of different religious symbols, crosses, Star of David, and they educate them, while having a snack to keep it fun. But a humanist group in New Mexico here in the U.S. actually does a Saturday, almost like a Sunday school that is secular, and Unitarian churches attend it. It actually takes place in a Unitarian church, and it's for atheists, humanists, secularists, whatever denomination you are, and they bring their kids in, they sing songs, they do art projects, they do science experiments together, and they learn about religion all together, but they learn about every religion, not one at a time or not their parents' religion, and It really allows the child to gauge what's happening in the world around them, and you're not shielding them from anything at the same time.
I think that's a very clever idea. Who was on the panel?
No one I had ever heard of. It was mostly the people from New Mexico at the that had been a part of this. A parent that was a member of it was there, and 2 others. I'm happy to forward you that information later. Sorry I don't have it on me.
Just tweet it when you think of it after the show. Just tweet it out, because I think we've got a small enough. Nobody listens to this anyway, so just tweet it to the people who are probably in the know.
I was just going to say, to add on to what he was saying, I agree with that, because not only can can theists indoctrinate their children into religion, there's cases of atheists indoctrinating their children into atheism. Mm-hmm. I mean, the perfect example of that is Madalyn Murray O'Hair. I mean, even though she was the founder of the American Atheists and started a huge movement, she sheltered her children. And actually, to this day, one of her children, he grew up as an atheist, but because he was so sheltered, he is now a huge Christian.
There's a risk of that happening, isn't it? Because if you want your child to grow up as an atheist, you're effectively planning their life for them, and it can cause them to rebel. And what's the obvious way to rebel? You do exactly what your parents don't want you to do.
Right. And I mean, as it is, atheism has that, like if a teenager comes out and says they're an atheist, they already have the label of you're just rebelling against society. So that's why you're being an atheist. And to go along, like, I plan on teaching both my children about religion, but I also plan on teaching them about mythology, because I think that allows them to kind of look at this. Like, I had that knowledge going into it, so I was reading the Bible. I'm like, that sounds like a lot from this story that I read about, and that sounds like that story too. So I was able to relate a lot of religion, that we know to be true, to a lot of our ancient ancestors, and that really also was a big piece of this is bullshit.
Well, a lot of the religions seem to have a lot in common, given that most of them were born of virgins under some particular star on a given day. And It's interesting as well with North Korea. You have a look at the dynasty, the Jong-il dynasty. Kim Jong-un, Kim Jong-il, the state religion is actually his grandfather, who apparently was able to speak by the time he was 10 months old. And there's all these amazing stories attributed to him, in the same way that so many of these other religious characters have. It's copy, paste, put a new label on it, here's our religion, game on.
Right. I mean, you could take a lot of Christianity, and you can find just about every part of Christianity in some other ancient, religion, mythology. I mean, even Noah's Ark. I mean, like you said, the virgin birth, December 25th. I mean, all of that. You can find it all somewhere in an ancient religion that is extinct.
Skeptical Clark, how difficult? You're a woman. We've only had 2 women on the show so far, so I defer to your expertise. How difficult would it be to conceive a child without a male?
Yeah, quite difficult. That depends on what you mean. Do you mean physical contact with a male, or just, of course we need that sperm cell.
There you go. I mean, it's not like it's not like you split down the middle like bacteria and just make a smaller person, is it?
Right.
I did want to bring.
Unfortunately,
I did want to just point out one thing. Something occurred to me. It's been nagging me. Discussing the secular parenting, but I was just having a look on my podcast list, and if the people listening to the show haven't had a chance to go and listen to The Atheist Experience, look it up on iTunes or look it up on YouTube. It's run by a guy called Matt Dillahunty.
Great.
And by golly gosh, it's a great show. They had an episode on, I'm just looking at it up here, episode 810, Atheist Parenting. It was about a month ago, almost to the day. Jen and Russell talked with Dale McGowan about atheist parenting. I did listen to that probably 2 or 3 times just to listen through it all and pick up a couple of points. And that's really experience of the secular parenting idea that I have. I have very little, but I'm beginning to take more note of it because it seems to be a topic that challenges people.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and Dale McGowan is actually his book, Parenting Beyond Belief, is responsible for my shift because I was really having a hard time not, my instinct was to raise them, in the way that we believe, which is we are atheistic. We do not believe, I hate that word, but we deny the existence of a God, particularly Yahweh and Allah and so forth. And, it was that put me on the right track, I think, where, really focusing more on exposing them to everything and trusting that they'll find their way. And yeah, Dale McGowan is fantastic. And again, I credit him for putting me on the right path where that's concerned.
Well, I've got probably a pertinent question for you guys. What would happen if one of your children came home one day and said, I went to church, absolutely loved it, I think this is for me? Go ahead, Dan.
I've thought about this, and I've had nightmares about it. I think one thing I would try to take from my own childhood, I was raised very religious, but I would be accepting of it and allow them to explore that, but I would talk to them with it. Instead of just yelling at them and saying, I don't believe that, or any of that kind of stuff, I would rather sit down and talk with them on a pretty regular basis just to see what they're learning, how it makes them feel, and just have a dialogue. And if that's how they want to express themselves, I'm not going to stop them from doing anything that they want, as long as it's not hurting them or others. But that's how I was raised. I was raised religious. When I told my parents that I didn't believe it, they were very accepting and talked to me. In later years, my dad told me he's an atheist too.
How to win. David, go ahead.
I would, as long as they're happy, I would be accepting of it. I mean, as long as they, I think I had the same question with the No Godcast, and I said as long as they're not in the extremes, like they're taking it to the extremes,
beheading people on the streets of London, yeah.
Or Westboro.
Westboro, or joining the Taliban,
or, the Mormonism where, she's got to share a man with 3 other women and that she's got to make as many kids as she can, something like that I would be completely against. But, and like what Dan was saying, I mean, absolutely, talk. I mean, that's the problem mostly these days with parents, they just don't talk to their kids.
Well, the kids are too busy playing the PlayStation.
And we're too busy on Twitter.
And Secular Park.
Yeah, agreed. I'd welcome it. I did it as a child too. I was born into a Catholic family, but they were not strong Catholics, and I went to Catholic school for a year, and then that was about it. I made my first communion, and then I was done. But I was really fascinated by children who were going through their confirmation and their confession especially. That seemed so mysterious. I really wanted to try it at some point and never got the chance to do so. And then I went to a Baptist church and joined a youth group. But all that time, I was not really a believer, but I was very interested in the community. And so I'd welcome my children to explore for sure. And Gamma and Dan, pointed to just talking with them and asking them questions. And again, my biggest thing would be my biggest struggle would be not to inject my feelings, my spin on it. Like, oh, so do you really think that, really questioning them without opinion. So
I went to Sunday school probably a few times because I was keen on a young lady at the time. This was, I would have been probably 10 or 12. I went along and did the singing and tried to play the games. It just didn't really connect with everybody else because I couldn't see the logic in it. It didn't apply. I couldn't apply the same rules that I'd learned in my own experience in the real world to this doctrine that they were presenting. And even at that point, the stories were fairly vague. There's Jesus dividing the bread and the fish for everybody else and feeding people, and I could not wrap my head around it. It just didn't make sense. Mm-hmm. But my parents were very supportive. They let me make my own decisions. I came to my own conclusions pretty quickly too, I might add. It wasn't a case of I went there for several decades and finally came out of it going, I've made my decision now. It was the case of maybe 6 or 8 weeks. It wasn't very long. But what did happen subsequently was there was on Wednesday afternoons, you'd pay $1 and you'd go to what was called Kids Club at the church next door to the school. And we'd go there and we'd make pictures and art out of spaghetti and, do what kids do. Sing songs, praise the Lord. And I hated it. I'd already made my decision by that stage, and I said to Mum and Dad, look, I really don't like going to this. To me, I would learn more out of watching cartoons, I would think. Certainly more about the real world. And they said, no, look, Adam, we can't get a babysitter, you've got to go. And that's how but you know what, I don't look back at it and regret that. I look back at it and go, well, it was an opportunity for me to learn more about how other people live their lives.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, definitely.
So tell me, Dan, if there was one piece of advice that you could give to somebody who's considering raising a child, what would it be?
Role playing. Oh, you mean after they have the kid? Still role playing. Some big advice I picked up and I plan to use this, is when your kid is, if I guess I should say, in school and is sharing, at this point at least, your same belief system, and kids will confront them. It's going to happen, especially around holidays and at certain ages when kids are going through communion or baptisms, any of that. How to address it and how not to be bullied for it, because they're going to get threats of hell. They're going to hear horrible things that could scare them, and they should be prepared. And so if your child is, sharing your belief at home, role play with them. Talk about what they should say when that happens. So also they don't get in a fight. They can very eloquently state their case and walk away from it. And, I think that's very important. I had never once thought of that. And I heard about that at the Humanist Conference and wrote that right in my notebook immediately.
That's brilliant. Go ahead, Gamma.
Yeah, I like that. I've never heard that, and that's a great idea. I really like that. I think that goes along the lines with teaching them self-esteem and confidence. Is like he was saying, Dan was saying that we're in the areas where religion is prominent in the younger kids, and like you say, these kids, they will be like, you're going to hell. And I think if our children have the confidence to be like, well, that's fine. I mean, I still like you. We can still be friends. That has nothing to do with it. And just teaching them, equality and just being a good person, teaching them eventually as they get older that you can be good without God. Actually, we're better without God, but
preparing your child to be able to deal with threats like you're going to hell, as they grow up, they're going to realize how little perhaps that means. To me, at that age, a greater threat would be you're going to have to do the washing up.
It's difficult because there isn't like a manual to this. There isn't, they have all these books for raising kids and do what they do at this stage, but there really isn't a book out there to say, hey, teach your kid this for if they ever get a threat of going to hell. So a lot of us are kind of winging it at this point. I mean, as the atheist movement progresses and our kids grow up, we can kind of see how we did and maybe write a book then. We can all get back together 20 years and see. And then, but
it's Secular Park.
Yeah, I think usually focused on, thinking critically and questioning everything. We do a lot of asking why and how, and when we don't know the answer, we try to find it, and sometimes we even change our ideas based on the evidence that we find. And so, teaching them to be critical thinkers is, what we do in our house. We honestly are still winging it with the whole, what to do. How do we model for them? How do we prepare them for those confrontations? Now, we live in an area that is, although conservative politically and religious, but we're still in a suburban area, outside a major city in the United We And so a lot of Catholics and Protestants, but not as much in the way of evangelicals. We don't come into that very much. And so I think, Catholics tend to just, they're Sunday worshipers, and they're kind of compartmentalized a bit. And I find that to be a bonus in that I don't think we've had any confrontations yet, at least none that my son has come to me about. And we're just going to take it as it comes. We sometimes wonder if we should, my husband is Asian, and so we sometimes think that perhaps we should just claim Buddhism, and then nobody would ask any questions, or we get fewer
death threats.
Yes, exactly. Really, truly. Because we are in an incredibly diverse,
marriage by the sound
community as well. Well, yeah. Yes, that too. But we're in a really diverse community, lots of religions, lots of cultures. I feel really fortunate for that, in that most people are pretty sensitive in this area. And I think most people, regardless of their religious background, are raising pretty sensitive children. I mean, and so I don't anticipate having too much of the, well, you're going to hell because you don't believe. So we're still really winging it, I'm afraid to say. And we're gonna, I guess, take it on as it comes, which is probably not great secular parenting, but that just happens to be where we are right now. You're doing the best
with what you got. I mean, it sounds like it's a very challenging task for all of you, and especially those of you who have more than one child. But a quick whip around, is this the most satisfying thing you've ever done?
Yes.
Oh, hands down.
Easy, yes.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, it's easily the most happiest. Like, this is the way I call parenting. I mean, there's nothing on this earth that will make you more pissed off, but then immediately, in a split second, it will make you, this is totally worth it.
Clearly you've experienced bipolar.
For sure.
It's
probably very similar.
That's probably poor man's parenting. Yeah. You're using that analogy. So,
yeah, parenting is bipolar.
Yeah.
So,
they're completely interchangeable.
I think in return for you guys giving up your time, is there anything you'd like to plug, or a quick point you'd like to raise before we finish up?
Well, why not? If I can plug. Well, this is a topic that I actually pitched to Emily, who runs the blog I write for, emilyhasbooks.com. As one of the topics I was going to want to write about would be secular parenting. It's a very important topic to me, and yeah, I think everyone pretty much nailed it with, critical thinking is going to be huge as part of raising any child, but especially if you're raising a secular child, because when they do hear about these religions and these things, it's going to be thinking critically about, are these statements real, and can they be? I think I'm probably mispronounce it, but transubstantiation in the Catholic Church. I want my son to hear that and think.
Probably not at this point, because transubstantiation sounds a lot like cosmic consciousness, I'd think, if you're a 2-year-old.
True. Not at this point, but at some point in his life, he's going to hear the word, and he's going to have to think, is it possible for a cracker to enter my mouth and become the body of some however many year old dead Jewish man from the Middle East?
And who also happens to be white in all the pictures.
Crazy enough.
All right. And Skeptical Park?
Yeah, I think this is, it's just a point that I don't think, anybody's going to have, succinct answers for, but, I think my biggest struggle is, the things that we've touched on, which is, how do we prepare our children to present to the world? I mean, my anonymity is important to me, because I'm not out as an atheist within my community, because I don't want my children to have to answer for our, lack of belief in a deity, because I am afraid of the backlash that might ensue. And, it's a real, I'd rather kind of keep it a gray area, and, I think we're going to put forth, which is probably going to be the truth, which is we're going to let them explore on their own. But, I really do keep it under wraps. I don't talk about it with anybody to protect my children from the potential backlash, although I don't know what it would be, but I don't want to take the risk.
Well, this is Skype call, and there's a high likelihood that the NRA are listening in, so this could become public knowledge very quickly.
That's true.
All right. And David, you had a plug on the last show, but just because I'm a nice guy, go ahead.
Well, I actually have a couple plugs. I mean, they're not all for me, so that, you can tell a secular bloke that I'm not completely Dave Kardashian. I did. Yeah, I did. I actually did write a post on my blog, GammaAtheist.com, on secular parenting. It was just my perspective and some of the tools that I use to kind of help me along. So I'm not going to give it away, so that way you can go read the post and see what I wrote about. But also, I read a book. It's called The Good News Club by Catherine Stewart, and this really only affects, it really only affects the American people for the most part, but it talks about how the Christian groups are attacking our elementary schools. Attacking is probably not the best word, but that's exactly what it is. And they're using they're using our elementary schools to indoctrinate the children. I mean, they're using cookies and candies and everything to lure the children in, and it was an interesting read, and it was a huge eye opener for me, especially because I have a 5-year-old who's in kindergarten. I had never even heard of this. I didn't even know this was going on. So again, for the listeners, the Good News Club, Catherine Stewart. If you're a parent, definitely check it out.
Excellent. Well, I recommend everybody take a while to listen through the podcast. Add some of the people we've discussed on the show. Go and have a read of some of the documents we've discussed. Guys, thank you very much for coming on. I know it's a volunteer thing. You give your time very generously. We've had Gamma Atheist, so at Gamma Atheist on Twitter, at Skeptical Park, and at Dan Arel, A-R-E-L. I'm at Adam Reeks, and thank you everybody for partaking in this call. It's been a great chat.
Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you.
we have a radio show here called Mix 106.5, and it's the guy on it turns the bass right up, so when he speaks he talks like this, and he goes, Skeptical Park, you've got a shout out to your husband.
Oh, stop it, that sounds a little creepy.
He's currently doing time in prison for beating women, and you just want to tell him that you still love him. So let's go to some Whitney Houston. He'll probably hear this from his prison cell.
Oh no.